Hey, everybody. Welcome to Friday night's late night happy hour. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky coming to you, as I just mentioned, Andy, on Friday. We got a great interview.
Hey.
Hey. Bernie ain't got shit to do. You might as well get high.
Mm-hmm.
We got a great interview coming up with Nekias Duncan from Basketball News that we recorded earlier today. Get into a bunch of stuff with the Lakers and Clippers. Talk a little bit about some Eastern Conference stars and what's going on just really around the league. One of the great young basketball writers. Everybody should be following him at Nekias NBA. So we'll get to that in a second. Before we start, though, Andy, some football news, not Super Bowl related. The Rams are apparently kicking the tires on Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford says the Rams are a viable place for him to land. He wants out of Detroit. Who can blame him? And is like, sure, the Rams, that works for me. And the Rams are like, okay, we'll see what we can do.
It doesn't feel to me like there's so much kicking the tires on Matt Stafford or somebody else as much as they're taking a bunch of tires, lighting them on fire, and then hoping that creates smoke signals to teams and quarterbacks around the league that they would like to do business with them and bring in a new quarterback.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is
the
like,
tires feels too subtle for what they're doing.
That's true. I think they're in the office with the sales agent just trying to figure out how they can get the price on that car down a little bit because look, sir, that car normally is going to cost you, a few first round picks and second rounder and a third rounder. Well, look, man, my finances, it's a pandemic. We're a little strapped for that. I don't think we can let you. Why don't you go talk to your sales manager and see what you can do for us, and we'll try to figure something out. But what you mentioned it, Andy, it's not that the Rams, we had Jordan Rodriguez and Rich Hammond on couple weeks ago, whatever it is. And, asked a lot of these questions. This was right after Right Now Gate. He's, when the season's over and Sean McVay's asked the question, he says he's our quarterback right now. And then the next day basically said it again, just in case people were confused.
And then basically Les Snead a couple of days later in his press conference was essentially said, look, you dumb shits, what are you not understanding? We're telling you we are looking to move him if possible. Like
that's what we would be willing to move away from him. We do not. Yeah.
Like he really was just like, oh my God, do we have to spell this out anymore for you morons? We are trying to move the guy.
But that's the thing. It's like we are more than happy to upgrade it at quarterback. And that's the fascinating part because we're not here to debate whether or not Matt Stafford is a better quarterback than Jared Goff. You've been better. You've been more confident in Goff than me for a while.
No, I'm starting to come around.
Right. My argument, 16 games of Goff this year, has become more persuasive. But you would agree that Matt Stafford is a better quarterback than Jared Goff.
Yeah, I do think he's a better quarterback. I think he's more prolific. I think he's got a more live arm, but also too, going over,
he's more mobile. It's all relative, but Stafford is definitely a more mobile quarterback.
He's more mobile. I would not want either one of them to run to save my life. But
Stafford's a better runner and mover than everything in Goff.
He is a better runner mover. I just don't think he is particularly good at
Deshaun Watson.
It's more that Goff is just worse. But the thing that really stood out when you start looking over the discrepancies in numbers and things like that, and Stafford's are better. But what jumped out at me was just how many fewer turnovers he has, and not even just interceptions. His fumble count over the last 3 seasons was, I think, 6 or 7 lower than Goff the last 2.
Yeah.
He just takes better care of the ball,
and that's playing behind a much crappier offensive line. The Lions have never really been able to protect Stafford, which is part of the reason,
guys to throw to.
Right, which is part of the reason he wants to leave.
Yeah.
So he's just
he's not interested in resorting to cannibalism as a strategy from his coach. The one that said they're just going to be biting
the
people's
knees.
What
was that?
Seriously, that more than anything else. Like if I'm Matt Stafford and I'm staring down the end of my career and I'm hearing the new coach that they brought in talk about how they're going to be biting people's kneecaps and like smiling after you knock them back. Then we're going to knock them back. That like doing all this. Basically, their strategy is we're going to play illegal football.
It's 2021, man.
Right.
It's in 1958. Like okay, great. Your football coach talks like that, but like we've moved beyond that.
Oh yeah,
like, real football coaches now do not talk like that.
Seriously, if I saw that and I'm Matt Stafford, my reaction is to call my agent and say,
honestly, I'm out as soon as I see Dan Campbell's goatee. Like that is not grown-up men in positions of responsibility should not have those.
Well, then in the meantime, you've got, it's funny actually, like we're trying to find this Goldilocks situation where you get the head coach who says the thing that's just right. Mm-hmm. And like Dan Campbell, definitely too hot. And then whatever the hell this new coach in Philly is, I have no idea what the guy's name is. I've seen these clips on Twitter where it looks like he's giving some genius talk, like he's like the head of some new startup talking about systems and that we're going to be the smartest team, but we don't have to think. And I'm just like, oh my god, like he's too cold. Can you find a coach who's just right? Like these two extremes going on, by the way, when nobody seems willing to hire Eric Bieniemy. Like you're sitting there going like, my God, if it ain't race, how the hell bad is Eric Bieniemy in an interview? Which, by the way, I don't think that's what it is. But you start when you start trying to play devil's advocate for things that you don't actually believe, but you try to come up with a reason. You're like, okay, maybe Bieniemy just doesn't interview well. Maybe he says something that rubs people the wrong way. Whatever. Again, this is not my thesis. I'm just throwing this out. And then you hear these two guys on opposite extremes introduce themselves to their new franchise.
It's just like, look, maybe Dan Campbell's a good coach. I don't know, but like just the knuckle dragging of this knee biting. It's just, like there is a 0% chance that it does not wear on people in 2 seasons. If that's really your message, this sort of old school smash mouth, in 2 seasons, the locker room is going to be so over your shit. It's like, it's unbelievable. That's just not the way people operate anymore. And it's absurd. And so, I just, what is so striking about this, and I don't think the Rams are going to be able to move off of Goff this year. I mean, they don't have the draft capital to, I think, look, I guess it depends on the market, but they likely with no first round pick this year and, limited all this stuff, they likely don't have the draft capital to move off of, to give enough for Stafford. The financial penalty, if they cut Goff, is like $60 million. If they trade him, it's still 20.
Yeah.
I don't know who the hell you can trade him to. It'd be like the NBA where you have to like attach a pick to it. I don't know what that is.
Like, they don't even have a lot of
they
those.
Don't, right. That's my point. I don't know how they get that done. And so, what is striking about it is how just nakedly unconcerned they are about hurting Jared Goff's feelings or offending him or making it seem like he's not their quarterback or they lack confidence. It's not subtle. Like they're not saying one thing and then doing another, which is how this normally goes. They're like, hey, shit, if we can do better at quarterback, that's exactly what we're going to do.
I mean, you've seen the frustration building with McVay the entire season. I think really, and this is something Jordan Rodriguez talked about on the few times that she's been on the show over the course of the Rams season. The turnovers, I think, are what really upset McVay more than anything else. Like it's one thing to stall out on a drive and have to punt and pin a team back, hope to rely on your defense. And the Rams have the type of defense that Green Bay game notwithstanding, you've been able to rely on all season. And, with Aaron Donald, you can pretty much always rely on them. It's another thing when you put your defense on your heels because you're turning the ball over.
Well, especially when they keep scaling the offense back for the specific purpose of preventing you from having to turn the ball over. Again, something that Jordan pointed out every time she was on our show. It's like the Rams didn't go downfield. They had a very conservative offense where they went short passes and got the ball out quickly and did all these things and relied on yards after the catch or whatever it might be. They did not go for these explosive long plays, high risk plays. It was a very low risk, low leverage offense, and he still threw 13 interceptions this year against only 20 touchdowns.
And the fumbles.
And the fumbles. But just all you put all of it together in an offense that's designed for him to do not that. And it's incredibly frustrating. And he's not getting better.
No. And I've said this before, and I maintain that this is the case. I don't think Jared Goff is the sole reason that offense has regressed. I think the number one reason that it's not the same that it was a couple of years ago is they don't have anybody who brought to the table what Todd Gurley had.
Sure.
Todd Gurley was what everything was built around. That being said, though, you are correct. Goff seems to be regressing, and he certainly does not seem to be somebody that can, elevate either what's there or just.
That's the thing. It's like, okay, you don't have Todd Gurley, but they still ran the ball reasonably effectively at a lot of points this season. They still have some good personnel on the outside. The offensive line was actually pretty good this year. And it just, like we said, and we'll get to Nekias Duncan here after this, but you just have to have perfect conditions for him to be really good and elevate and lead your team places that otherwise couldn't go. And that's not football. You can't count on that.
No.
So, all right. So we'll maybe talk a little more NFL afterwards. But we want to get to our interview with Nekias Duncan again, one of the best young basketball writers out there. We spoke to him this afternoon. Tons of great stuff on the Lakers and Clippers and everything going on around the league. So here's that. All right, Nekias, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Good to see you again.
No problem, man. How are y'all?
We're doing good. So Andy and I, we've been very angsty. The Lakers, they've lost 2 games in a row, Nekias. The kingdom is crumbling. Things are desperate. They did go 14 minutes, it seemed, in Detroit on Thursday without scoring. So, I mean, that was particularly ugly. But when you see stuff like that, a couple games in a row, what do you think?
I think it's time to pick up some phones. We got to make some calls, man. I don't think this team is. I don't know.
Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth necessarily. Read too much into what you're saying. But do you move LeBron first, AD first, or do you package them together for picks? Because you probably get a lot and you just blow the thing up and start over.
I hear Cade Cunningham is going to be the next coming. So I think what you do is you kind of scour the bottom of the standings, see who has the best odds for that top pick. And I think you trade them separately so you can get two
that is how smart front offices make smart moves, Nekias. So
that's what you do. You get rid of the aging LeBron and the injury-prone Anthony Davis, and then
that is true.
Yeah, you get Cade Cunningham, you get Evan Mobley, and now you have Laker basketball set for the next 15 years.
Right, and you can use those guys in a couple of years to trade for Anthony Davis.
Once they're ready.
Right, exactly.
Ready.
There it is, full circle.
But it obviously, people freak out locally when these sorts of things happen. But I heard you and Steve Dunn Jr., your podcast co-partner on the Dunker Spot, kind of talking about the Lakers and breaking them down. And granted, this was, I think, recorded before the calamity in Detroit. But when you look at the Lakers and you see where they are now, and we'll talk about them relative to the Clippers too, who are doing some good things too. If you want to kind of find where the weaknesses might be, because that's where people's heads are after they lose a couple games in a row, what do you think they are?
I think what I've seen from the Lakers this year, good and bad, really, is that they haven't necessarily had to have been super engaged on both ends. They've been the best defense in the NBA by far, and it still feels like they're playing at 80% throttle. And offensively, they're doing doing some different things. LeBron is taking a little bit of, don't want to say he's taking a back seat, but he definitely isn't dictating as much as he normally does. Dennis Schroder's doing a lot of the handling. You still have Anthony Davis to kind of run actions through. You're doing some high post stuff with Marc Gasol. So from there, you're kind of letting, if LeBron doesn't run the action, you're letting a lesser player run the action. And I think that's fine for building habits and building counters that are going to be necessary in the playoffs. But in the regular season, there comes some times to where those guys don't have it, and you kind of need your top guys to step up. Going back to the Detroit games, LeBron was playing without Anthony Davis. He started out hot, and then once he slowed down, the Lakers slowed down too. So I think the big thing for me is just kind of energy/effort level. And I don't think that's not something I'm worried about long term. That's just them trying to get through the regular season healthy. So I'm not super worried about that.
Yeah, this is something Brian and I have talked a lot about on the Late Night Happy Hour and also the Land of Lakers podcast, Nekias. Just the idea that the Lakers are not, going at 80% the way you put it. And some nights I don't even think it's that high.
Sometimes they max out at 80% and they spend a lot of it at 60.
But I don't think they're doing it because, like, you'll see often with teams that are coming off a championship or maybe looking to three-peat, something like that, or 3 finals appearances in 4 years, where they're just bored with the regular season and they have no interest in it. They just want to get through it and they're just thinking about the playoffs. I don't think this team is like that. I actually think they're pretty professional in the way they go about doing this. I think they recognize just we are coming off, a very quick turnaround, a finals run. We've got LeBron at his age. We've got Anthony Davis with the wear and tear that he's had over his body. This roster is not as old as last season's, but it's certainly not a young roster. There's an element of practicality to what they're doing as opposed to just thinking they're above 72 games this year.
Right. I would agree with that. And I would, reference them giving more time to a guy like THT. There's a lot more experimentation with the young guys. Like, they're doing a little bit more to try to find a role for Kyle Kuzma. I think they've made that an emphasis to see exactly what he is and where he fits. So that's why you will have these 2-game stretches to where maybe it doesn't look super great. But long term, I don't think there's a big pressing issue there. Like, we know what the Lakers are for you.
What are you seeing? Like, you talk about a different role for Kuz, and like I think how I actually asked Vogel about this a few games ago. Just he's Kuz, you can tell, is definitely embracing that idea of like a little bit of an energy guy. I think he wants to still score and all that stuff. But like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to rebound, I'm going to get some offensive boards, I'm going to try to block shots, I'm going to be that sort of energy player. And I think some of the comfort in doing that comes from having the contract and knowing that he's secure, at least with the Lakers or someone else is going to get his money. And I think that helps. But when you talk about like a different kind of stuff that they're, experimenting with him, what are you seeing?
I think it's what you point to is him kind of taking that initiative to be more of an effort guy. I will also point out that he has looked a lot better because he's knocking down threes. That was a huge question mark for him coming into the season. I think he's around 38% mark right now on moderate volume. We'll see if that lasts. It's because we know how the jumper kind of fluctuates. But once you add in the increased effort on defense, you see him crashing the glass a little bit more. You see him more as a play finisher, more so than an ISO guy. And then he's a guy that can kind of relocate and knock down spot-up shots for you. You have a very valuable forward on your hands.
You mentioned THT a little bit before, and I definitely want to get into your impressions of him. But I remember about a month before the season began, Nekias, we had you on the Land of Lakers podcast. And it was right around when it was solidified that they had Dennis Schroder, Montrezl Harrell. They may have actually even had Wes and Marc Gasol by then. I don't remember the exacts of how these things laid out. But we talked a lot about how you thought these new pieces would end up fitting in with the team. Now that we're 20 games in, what are your impressions specifically of the new guys in terms of good fit, bad fit still, being determined, that sort of thing?
I don't think I've seen anything that's out of the realm of what I've pictured coming in. I will say Dennis Schroder has been a lot better defensively than I thought he was going to be.
Us too.
Like, he's always had the tools, and he's had flashes even going back to last postseason to where he looked like a really good on-ball defender. But he hasn't put that together consistently throughout his career, and he's completely locked in. So I think that's been the most impressive thing for him.
How much do you think of that is started, once obviously Atlanta is not the greatest place, particularly that era, to learn good habits about anything. Just with all the inconsistency there, and it was Atlanta. But like when you go last year, he's playing with CP and a more disciplined team environment and all that kind of stuff. How much do you think it sort of came from that portion of his career? And now he comes here and it's a championship caliber team, and the expectations are you have to be able to at least compete on that side.
I think he's fed off of the heightened expectations. Like even in Atlanta, it was a mess for most of his tenure there. But when they did make the playoffs, he was going toe to toe with a guy like John Wall when he was healthy. Mm-hmm. In OKC, didn't particularly score the ball well, but again, raised his effort defensively, really brought some extra energy and added something as a ball handler. So I think going to the Lakers to where you have not just playoff aspirations, but title aspirations from day one, and even beyond that, you're the clear favorite. So I think he has really taking on that challenge and trying to fit in the best way that he can. He also kind of had to back himself up a little bit because once the word got out that he was like, I'm going to be a starter, my agents talked about it, and getting a little bit of that blowback there, there's a target on your back, especially in LA. Like, hey, if you're claiming, hey, I'm going to be the starting point guard, even with LeBron there, we can talk about how silly that conversation can be. Like, in general, there's going to be a little bit of more attention on your head. So you got to step up there. And I think he's really taking that challenge, particularly on the defensive end.
Yeah. I mean, the I guess continuation of that when you're talking about it, wanting to start, it's a contract year for him. There's not really a better showcase you can have as a player, whether re-signing with the Lakers or just on the open market. The idea of I could handle being, a starting caliber important player on both sides of the ball of a championship team. I mean, that's a really, really good resume builder, particularly for a guy like Schroder, who spent a lot of the early part of his career. And I will be the first to admit, I am among those who felt this way. That was like, look, he's obviously got talent and he can score, but he's erratic. And he's not somebody that I would want to rely on. And being able to turn that type of perception on its head, whether last year where I thought he played really well with OKC, or the opportunity in front of him here. I mean, this could be a potentially career-changing opportunity for him.
I definitely agree that he's taken all of this in stride. I do have my worries about the jumper. Like we talked about Kuz shooting well, and the Schroder is not. And I think at a certain point, especially when you're playing alongside a guy like LeBron, you have to space the floor. Like that's just kind of a prerequisite for being a ball handler alongside LeBron. So that has to come around for him. But everything else, the rim pressure, the on-ball defense, the playmaking, like it's all been there. And it couldn't have come at a better time for him.
Yeah, I mean, the rim pressure thing is funny. It's like he's still been able to get to the rim. That, he's a bad January, not shooting the ball well, but he's not finishing. And so like the second half of the Cleveland game, I guess, the second half of that game, and then at least some of the Detroit game, he was better. But like the gap between, you talked about with AD not being there, like the Detroit game looked like last year, where the nights where LeBron couldn't carry them and orchestrate and whatever in that fourth quarter when they stopped scoring, it just wasn't coming from anyone. But when Schroder works,
other than Kuz,
yeah. Well, I mean, they went, what was it, 7 minutes without 7 and something minutes without scoring. I mean, nobody scored.
THT chipped in, but I mean,
he did. I'm just talking about down the stretch, like literally nobody. Yeah. They're on 87 points for like an hour.
Yeah.
And so like the difference he makes offensively when it's working jumps off the screen. So how good do you think it needs to be? Like when you talk about the shooting needs to be a little better from the outside, does he need to be, 37, 38, 41%, or can like he settle in at a credible 34, 35 and still that's enough if he can get to the rim and finish?
I think if it's a credible 35, 36, that's really all he needs. Like I don't think, especially at this stage of his career, teams aren't going to change the way they defend him. Mm-hmm. Like they're going to duck under picks. They're going to help off if he's spotting up when LeBron and AD are running actions. So you just have to hit that at a marginal rate to where they have to at least think about it. And as long as you do that, that's going to complement the driving, which is his strength. And he can kind of keep the chain moving that way. So he just needs to be, if he's average, that's fine because he brings everything else.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you, because you made a great point on the pod with Steve the other day that, part of what's made the Clippers so effective offensively is that everybody is shooting in the the high mid to high 40s or something like that, 41, 42, 43, 45% from three. And it's distributed from Kawhi all the way down, through Marcus Morris and whatever. The Lakers, their 3-point shooting has been kind of floated a lot by, LeBron has just been insane, up around, last few games, up around 42% now overall for the season. But KCP is still at 50%. Caruso is still well over 50%. How much are you buying the outside shooting for the Lakers, particularly relative to the consistency that the Clippers have shown? Because the flip side for the Lakers is AD is around 32%, hasn't shot the ball particularly well from out there. Because that distinction to me could become a really critical difference maker, assuming those two teams meet in the playoffs.
I would say on balance, I do think the Clippers have better shooters. Like, they have higher percentage guys, and they have just a broader volume of guys that can knock down shots. So I will give the Clippers the edge there. Where the Lakers will have the edge is that they have two guys in LeBron and Anthony Davis, well, really three guys and Dennis Schroder, who can get to the rim whenever they want to and force rotations and create those shots. And one of the things that I brought up on the pod was that the Clippers are shooting super well, and they are scheming this thing up to where they have more off-ball actions and they kind of force rotations that way. But the dirty little secret behind their offense is that they are not getting to the rim a lot, and they're not getting to the free throw line a lot. So while they've done a fantastic job of generating looks, it hasn't always been super easy. So I do think that even if the Clippers have better shooters, the Lakers are set up in a way to where they can create those kind of looks easier just because of the guys they have and the rim pressure that those guys provide.
Is it they can't get to the rim, or aren't getting to the rim, or can't get to the rim?
I would say it's a little bit of both. Like, I do think Kawhi and Paul George can get to the rim, but as I mentioned on the pod, if those guys are in isolation situations or they're coming off a ball screen, both of those guys want to go to their pull-up jumpers. If Kawhi's isolating, he wants to post up and toss in a post fadeaway. They just kind of lean towards being jump shooters, and they're very, 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 very good at it. But that's just kind of their tendencies as players. Whereas LeBron, he's getting downhill, and what's made him even more unstoppable is that now he's complementing that with a 3-point shot that's going in at a 42% clip.
Well, in the meantime, Lou Williams didn't get into the line. Like that's a big part.
That's weird.
But it's true though. I mean, he's shooting fewer than half the free throw attempts that he had last season.
Yeah, it's just been a weird thing. And that's kind of what I'm tracking as the season goes on, because they're just not going to have 6 guys shoot 40% from three. Like those numbers are going to dip at least a little bit. So I want to see what the counter is. And that's also why I asked Steve on the pod if he thinks they're a piece away. If they need to trade for a point guard, he kind of pushed back and said they just need someone that can get to the rim, not necessarily a point guard. But I tend to agree with that. They need somebody that can consistently pressure the rim.
Well, as we discussed earlier, Anthony Davis and LeBron James clearly should be available. So, make an offer. See what you can do.
What are the biggest things that you see right now with the Clippers that look different this year that speak to Ty Lue being the one in charge right now? Whether you're talking about on the court, whether you're talking about what seems to be the vibe on the team, because you may have heard, Nekias, they had some issues last season. So that I was going to say it was a word on the street until they all just flat out admitted it. But wait, what are you seeing that looks different to you?
Again, offensively, I think their pace overall is still low, and that kind of needs to tick up a little bit. But in terms of how fast they're running their actions, I think that's the biggest change. Like, that's just a Ty Lue staple, period, even going back to the Cleveland days when he took over. Even those Cavaliers didn't push and transition a ton, but when they wanted to trigger their half-court sets, they did it with a purpose. So I think we've seen a lot more of that for the Clippers. And that's helped Paul George kind of attack with an advantage. That's helped Kawhi Leonard attack with an advantage. And then once those guys get around the elbow, they're forcing those rotations that are similar to guys getting all the way to the paint. And once those rotations happen, they're kicking it out, and it's a swing sequence. I think a guy like Nicholas Batum has been huge for him because he's really kept the ball moving in those situations. So I think the ball movement and just the pace in which they're getting into their actions has been the biggest change from last year to this one.
Yeah, he ended up a really sneaky good pickup for them. Nick Batum. I mean, he made sense when they brought him in, but the type of impact that he's had has been better than I thought it would be.
He's been fantastic. He's doing it on both ends. Like, the Clippers are switching a ton. He's picked up a lot of tough matchups to kind of save Kawhi and save Paul George, and he's held his own there. And again, offensively, he's knocking down shots. He's keeping the ball moving with passes. He's relocating off the ball and kind of keep stressing defenses in that way. Like, he has just filled in all the gaps they need him to.
And how are any concern that that's not, because look, I mean, Nick Batum, more than any human being probably in the NBA, was left for dead over the last season or two. I am always suspicious of skillful players who are kind of like that, who aren't stars, who get paid a lot, and end up on really bad teams. It just they're really
specifically Charlotte.
Yeah,
it seems like Charlotte is where spirit goes to die.
Kind of. But like, he's not a guy who is, necessarily good enough to elevate bad talent. And, you well past the point in his career where you need, you want him as the focal point of your offense, but always seemed, from a skill set standpoint, to be a perfect complement to a really good team with really good players. I don't worry about him being somebody who kind of tails off and slows down or whatever over the course of the year, because this role seems to make perfect sense. But should there be concern that, because if he tails off, it makes a big difference in what they're doing?
I don't super worry about it for two reasons. As you alluded to, he has the skill set to fit alongside a good team, and the Clippers have two of the best 5 wings in basketball. So he's in a situation to where all of his best skills are going to be highlighted. And beyond that, even if he does tail off or if he gets hurt, because he's had those concerns throughout his career, you take him out at the 4 and you insert Marcus Morris. And he doesn't give you the passing, but he gives you the switchable defense. He gives you the shot making. He gives you the 3-point shooting. So I don't think the Clippers will super miss a guy like Nick Batum if they do have to pull him out the rotation or cut his minutes or whatever.
In the meantime, though, if he actually manages to keep this up all year, if you have some type of lineup with Kawhi, Paul George, Batum, and Marcus Morris, like the switchability of that lineup, I mean, I don't even know who the 5th person is. I'm not even sure I care. Like that, there's a lot of possibility there in terms of just being able to look at most matchups across the NBA and being able to say, we can defend that.
There isn't. I mean, you go bigger, go Zubac at the 5. And, he started off slow, but now he's back to protecting the rim at a high level and finishing around the rim. So you have that kind of switchability 1 through 4, and then a rim protector like that. Good luck.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because like we were talking to Law Murray, who covers the Clippers for The Athletic earlier this week. That was Monday, right?
Yeah, God, yes, it was.
Time is time, man. And he pointed out, like, they've sort of solved this point guard problem, which was seen to be their big weakness. The Clippers got to go get a point guard, just by kind of telling Kawhi and PG to run the offense. And to some degree that mitigates the Lou Williams issue. What can you do within the playoffs? You need somebody at the point. It mitigates the, do we got to go out and get somebody issue and all that stuff. We don't have any things to try. Those guys are skillful enough. And I mean, is that kind of how you read it too, that they've kind of managed to get past this point guard problem that everybody seemed like they were saying that they had coming into the year?
They've definitely quieted a lot of it. I hesitate to go all the way there and say that they don't need someone, because again, I am still eyeing the rim attempt numbers. I'm still eyeing the free throw attempt numbers. And even if you feel like Lou Williams is going to bounce back, I mean, his career would say at some point he's going to get back to drawing a bunch of fouls. We've seen what happens to him in the postseason. Yeah. And beyond him, again, Kawhi leans pull up and turnaround jumper. Paul George leans pull up. Marcus Morris leans post up and turnaround. Nicholas Batum is a jump shooter. Luke Kennard is a jump shooter. I do worry about the rim pressure they can generate in a playoff setting. I don't think they're going to miss it in the regular season at all. Like, I think the system is good enough. There's enough low-hanging fruit, particularly with the pace, that they can lean to and look even better offensively. And they have been an elite offense already. So I don't super worry about it there. But when games do slow down and they need someone that can just kind of get to the rim and force a rotation, I do think they need one more guy. And I would say dangle a guy like Reggie Jackson or dangle a guy like Lou Williams if you feel like you want to try to cash in on that chip. Get someone that can get to the rim for you. And that's going to
actually just sort of solve the Lou problem by trading Lou. That's interesting. Assuming they kept it, that goes in a completely different direction than I was going to ask this question, obviously. But let's just say that they keep him. They find some other. The Lakers have a perceived playoff potential problem in Harrell and his ability to stay on the floor and defend. The Clippers have the same kind of issue with Lou. Which one do you think is more likely to hurt their respective team based on who's on the roster now? I just thought of that one.
That's a good question. I would say Lou is the bigger problem because he's easier to hunt just because of how small he is.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, if he does get play off the floor, again, he's also the best chance they have at getting the guy that can go downhill and draw some fouls for you.
I was going to say, I think the Clippers have a harder time replicating what they look for in Lou than the Lakers have replicating what they look for in Harrell. Right. I think that, to me, it's actually I don't consider – I mean, this is something Brian and I have talked about a lot since the moment Montrezl Harrell was signed. I don't discount the idea that Montrezl Harrell in certain situations in the playoffs could become problematic or difficult to put on the floor. I just don't think it matters that much. Like I don't think that's going to become a big thing for the Lakers.
Especially if Kuz can really genuinely fill that rebounder role, that energy role, can go crash through. Not the same player, obviously.
No, but I think Montrezl Harrell was very much brought in to be a regular season guy, like somebody that can take the load off a lot of these guys over the course of the regular season. You know, these guys who went on deep playoff runs, and what happens in the playoffs happens in the playoffs. But if he can play well over the course of the regular season, I've heard a few people describe him as an innings eater, and I think that's actually a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
Then that $9 million was very, very well spent in my mind.
Absolutely. Like, you know what he brings in the regular season. And I agree with you. If it does get to a potential matchup, say they face Denver, like if he's just getting mashed defensively or he's getting mismatch hunted by Jamal Murray or somebody like that, you take him out and you play Anthony Davis at the 5, and
it's still pretty good.
That's just kind of it.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's likely going to be a lot. It's likely going to be a lot of that with LeBron as the, point guard name quasi 4 in certain things, and then 3 wings, which is what we saw in the playoffs, and it won a championship. Maybe Markieff Morris or Kuz, but we've basically seen the look that it's going to be in closing moments of high leverage games, and I think for the most part, it's going to be LeBron, AD, KCP, Caruso, TBD 5th guy.
Right, defaulting to Schroder right now, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do actually mean to interrupt you because I'm just excited about this point.
It felt like
I
you went
literally
out of your way
interrupted.
to interrupt.
Obviously, it was important, but like the dynamic is different too. Like Trez, first of all, like you just said, Andy, is not in that closing lineup. The expectation is the Lakers won't be able to hold on to him next year anyway, and it's a different deal than the Schroder thing where you're trying to build that sort of longer relationship. The starting thing is a much bigger issue for Schroder than it is for Harrell and all that. So like the dynamic isn't even the same. Like if Trez doesn't like not playing down the stretch in the 4th, I guess he can go and be upset with a second team next year when he gives press conferences. We want to ask you a little bit about the conference, but Andy, you talked about it. You tweeted about this the other day, right? About the Anthony Davis and what might be his recovery problem from last year. I thought that was an interesting one I wanted to get into, but go ahead.
Yeah. I was piggybacking on to another guy on Twitter, and I apologize, I can't remember his actual name. He goes by, I think, @RunTheJules, JULES, but can't remember.
Presumably not his Christian name, as they say.
No, or also I don't think anything affiliated with hip hop. I think it's just somebody completely different whatsoever. But the idea that AD is basically figuring out how to deal with the after effects of a long playoff run, because last season was the first time he had ever been on this long of a run. I mean, forget the fact that it's a quick turnaround. Like he had never been to the finals before. I don't even remember. I mean, had the Pelicans been to the Western Conference Finals? I can't recall off the top of my head.
No, they had that second round series after they kind of
exactly
Portland that year. But that was it.
Exactly. So I mean, like this was something really new for AD. On top of how fast it was, he's learning how to negotiate this, as opposed to somebody like LeBron, who has a zillion miles, but he's been to, I think it's 9 of the last 11 finals, something like that. So, I mean, even under compressed circumstances, he knows what it means to recover, to have a relatively speaking shorter off season than everybody else. And this is something that AD is just trying to figure his way through. Do you think there could be something to that? Because he has not come out of the gate as hot as a lot of people, myself included, expected.
I do, actually. That's something that I haven't even considered, like beyond the quick turnaround. Like I figured, I wouldn't be surprised if LeBron or Brown's kind of slow play it through the beginning of the season just with the turnaround. But that's a great point. That was the first extended playoff run of Anthony Davis' career on top of the quick turnaround. So that could definitely explain some of the blah energy effort that we've seen from him so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, there are times like I feel like where he kind of wants to crank it up, and it's not quite there. It's like not as instant. Most of the time it's there, but I think little things like just the mental stuff, like the missing the free throws, I think is just dragging him down in ways that he's not used to. And if you're a fan wondering where the extra 3 or 4 whatever points every night from Anthony Davis aren't there from, it's the free throws. He's supposed to be averaging 4.5 points a game more because he's not shooting the ball well. And I think little stuff like that, because he has very high expectations, are just kind of dragging him down. So it's physically and mentally, I think it's a hard adjustment.
Yeah, that's true. The free throw shooting's at 71%, the 3-point shot is at 32%. Both numbers are, I believe, lower than what they were last year. So I that's low hanging fruit for him. But it is encouraging.
And those are legs things.
Yeah, definitely. I do think it's also encouraging that when he does ramp it up, like most times he can get there. Like I'll point back to the Houston matchup earlier this year, where Christian Wood kind of made some of the airways. It was like, I got this matchup penciled, and Anthony Davis, what do you have, like 20 on him in the first quarter or something like that?
Yeah, he wasn't here for it. It's like, Christian Wood, congratulations on your breakout year, but no, no, you shouldn't have done that. And I felt bad for Wood because it kind of got played like Wood was like, I'm coming for you, AD. Like, I'm going to take you. He was just like, I'm excited at the challenge of playing.
I think
Anthony
they're
Davis.
friends. I think they're actually like they have a relationship. It wasn't shit talking. Like it was just him being amped to play against one of the best players in the league.
It's like exactly what you would want a young player to be, like not shying away from it. But it got turned into Christian Wood thinks he can own Anthony Davis. Did not work out.
Speaking of AD, Nekias, as we sort of started looking around the rest of the league, you wrote a good piece for Basketball News about Bam Adebayo and the evolution of his game. You were recently on with Kevin O'Connor with The Ringer, talking at more length about Bam and the potential for him to be a top 10 player. What are the things that you're still looking for from Bam? And in particular, I want to ask you about this. Is the potential template for him or the avatar in terms of reaching that potential AD? Like, when you just start thinking about like the type of skill set and versatility that somebody can have on both sides of the ball at that type of size.
Yeah, I think AD East is kind of what you want to aim for. And if you can get to 85% of Anthony Davis, then you're looking at an all-star, which Bam is. If you get into 90 or 95% of Anthony Davis, then you're getting into that upper echelon. And I think Bam is starting to push that. as I wrote in the piece, like I do worry about him finishing oversized. There are still a lot of awkward flips and a lot of finesse finishes around the rim to where when he's challenging these true centers. Like as athletic as Bam is, as strong as Bam is, and he has the plus wingspan, he's still 6'9" with a 7'3" wingspan. So that's solid size, that's really good length, but that still isn't starting center. And that, that showcases throughout, the portions of a game to where he's attacking a guy and trying to figure out ways to finish over. But that's also why I think the development of his jumper has been so important, because he doesn't have to take as many beatings against traditional centers if you can just knock down elbow jumpers at a 50% clip like he has for most of the year. So just having that counter in his bag helps. It preserves him because he has to do a lot of heavy lifting defensively, especially now since Jimmy Butler's out and Avery Bradley came back, but he's out again. So they're missing a lot of guys, and Miami has him switching all over the place, and he's crashing the glass. And he's tasked with carrying the load offensively because of all these guys being out. So I think having something like that just to kind of conserve some of his energy, I think is huge for him.
Who do you see as a comp in terms of the incredibly steady growth? And I realize, PER is not a perfect metric for this, but you go back as a rookie, 15.7, this would be a basketball reference, but second year, 18, third year, a little over 20, this year, a little, 23 and a half. These are pretty big chunks of improvement year after year after year for a guy who's, I think, 23, correct?
I have my answer, but I want to hear Nekias's first.
Who do you see as the, some of the comps for that kind of thing where you kind of just look up and go, holy shit, like this guy keeps adding stuff every year. He's just that much better every year.
I think the easy one within that context is Pascal Siakam.
Interesting.
Just because Pascal he went from super cool energy player to important role player to quality starter to all-star, and then he starts into a number one role and all NBA guy. And he kind of plateaued this year. He's starting to pick it up now. But just in terms of that consistent growth, as we see with young players around the league all the time, like that kind of progress is rare, but progress in general isn't linear for a young guy. Like a lot of different factors go into it. And the fact that Bam has been able to go from, energy guy to role player behind Hassan Whiteside to quality starter to all-star, and now he has made legit superstar flashes this season. And that's obviously been huge for him.
Here's the one I had.
Whoa.
Ooh, all right.
Well, I think when you start looking at his progression, in some ways, I think with skill set, it's not completely apples to apples, but in some ways skill set, but also just continually getting better in these very tangible ways. We forget that when Giannis first started, he was not Giannis. Like Greek Freak was his nickname.
It was like watching a baby deer play basketball.
Right. Greek Freak was the nickname because he was a sick athlete. You could tell that right away, and B, just Greek and Freak rhyme. So it made a lot of sense. But like Giannis did not look like Giannis out of the gate. Like I think that has become kind of forgotten with his rise becoming so pronounced. So, and I don't remember what it was, but last offseason, I actually looked up some of Bam's numbers, comparing them to Giannis, and I noticed how similar a lot of them were. Like there are a lot of similarities in their year-to-year numbers starting out. So that's why Giannis came to mind for me.
No, I can definitely see where you're coming from there. I also like that comparison because you can see just where the things on the margins matter the most. To where, Bam's 6'9" with a 7'3" wingspan, Giannis is 6'11" with a 7'5" wingspan, the body's filled out. And that's where Giannis is able to have these ridiculous finishes over guys and through guys because he's so strong and he, has those extended arms and can get those kind of finishes that just aren't accessible to Bam. And that's kind of where I think it's dangerous to say Bam's ceiling is capped anywhere just because of the way that he's grown. But in terms of the physical limitation, you can just see even a couple of inches in the wingspan, a couple inches in height. It just unlocks things for Giannis that just aren't available to Bam right now.
Well, I hope Giannis isn't watching this, Nekias. You just ruined his day. Bam. I'm sorry. Bam. You ruined his day.
Well, I mean, if you end up slightly not quite Giannis Antetokounmpo, you're still probably a pretty good player. But like, where does he finish out? Because I mean, this is, you talk about something that's just massive for Miami. There is a huge difference between, their future in the Eastern Conference with Bam as a, perennial all-star, second, third team guy, whatever it might be, and Bam as a, borderline hyper elite player who is a, contender for first team every year.
I mean, I think the jury's kind of out. Like, again, there are still some limitations that Bam is trying to work through. I do think that's kind of the silver lining for Miami having so many guys out right now, is because Bam is kind of forced the issue. He's forced to expand his game. We've seen the increase. We've seen the increase in the effectiveness of his jumper. So that's been huge. The big thing for him is just aggression in general. Like, I think he has needed to be nudged in this direction for a while. Like, he was an all-star last year, and he very well could have been putting together more 20-point efforts if he was actually looking at the basket. Like, he get the ball in the high post. He's staring down Duncan Robinson, or staring down Goran Dragic, or staring down Tyler Hero to operate in these handoffs or these pick and rolls to where he can face up and attack a guy at the dribble. So the fact that he's doing that more this year, I think it's going to be huge for him now and moving forward. We'll just have to see how the rest of his game fills out to see if he does make that leap into that hyper elite class or not.
It's funny, like, it's so much of perception. Like, when you think of a guy's skill set, like, people may not understand how developed his skill set is. And, go check out people should check out a piece to see, you have the video breakdowns and you can really see what Bam is doing. It's just, you think of him as an energy player. His name's Bam. Like, I think it's hard to get past some of that stuff. But like, speaking of sort of that kind of improvement, Joel Embiid has just been crushing it in Philly this year. Obviously, sort of early MVP candidate. Is there improvement that just kind of, does it come down to ultimately Embiid is playing that much better? How much is that? How much is the sort of structural changes that they made with Curry and Green and stuff like that? They just beat the Lakers the other night too.
I think it's a little bit of both. Like, Joel seems to be in a little bit better shape. Like, the minutes are definitely up there compared to last year. He stayed healthier for the most part. And the structural changes are huge for him. Just having shooters, you can't double as easily, you can't double as quickly, which means Joel Embiid just has more one-on-ones, or at least off the first couple of dribbles of his post-up, he has that one-on-one. And that's kind of all he needs, because he has incredible touch, incredible footwork, incredible strength, incredible size. So the fact that he's been put in better positions, it's made him more difficult to guard. It's made the Sixers more difficult to guard.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Nekias, and this surprised me today. I was looking up some numbers before you came on, because I know we wanted to ask you about Philly. And their actual three-point percentage this season is basically the same as last season's. And the amount of attempts per game is literally the same. It's 31.6 per game both years. Mm-hmm. But when you've got guys like Danny Green and Seth Curry on the floor, combined with Embiid actually shooting better from outside, but like those guys in particular, the gravitational pull and the reputation, mm-hmm. I imagine, would make defenses treat them differently, even if in some ways they're not shooting that much better. You're going to think about them differently. You might scheme against them differently.
Yeah, like that's really what it is. Like, they literally have a Curry on their roster, and he isn't Steph, but when you have a guy that can shoot at that high of a clip, stationary or otherwise, you have to have added attention. And what the Sixers have been doing, at least particularly on one set, they'll have Curry lift off of a screen from Embiid, get the ball, he'll catch the ball off that screen, and then it's immediately a dump into Joel Embiid on the block. And from there, you help one man away, it's Seth Curry taking a wide open three. So the double has to come somewhere else, and those are easier passing reads for Joel Embiid to make as well. So it's just having that kind of pull from a guy like Curry, it just bends defenses in a way to where there are no good options. Like, it's either one-on-one coverage or you send help from somewhere that's going to force a longer rotation. And with Joel Embiid posting up in the position that he is, it's an easier kick out for him, and it's just open look. So the volume may be the same, but the attention before that shot is so much different than last year.
So when you look at the East, how many teams would you say kind of legitimately have a chance? Like, let's say we'll put the threshold like 15%, like 15% or better of advancing out of the conference. How many teams do you think legitimately have that kind of opportunity? And then which teams?
I would say Milwaukee's definitely there.
Sure.
Philly's definitely there. Brooklyn's definitely there, and Boston is definitely there. So I think in terms of the 15%, I think that's where it's at.
If Miami can get their team back on the floor, do they qualify?
It becomes a matchup game for them like it was last year, but I do think there's a path to where they could do that. They still match up really well with a team like Milwaukee. If you do get in a position to where the shooters don't really show up for Philly, that's an interesting matchup there just because Miami is very good at helping off the non-shooters. That's just been a staple defending. It doesn't matter what the defense is. Switch heavy, drop heavy, zone heavy. They locate the non-shooters and then they send extra attention elsewhere because of that. So I think that's where they would force a guy like Ben Simmons to beat them. So I do think that could be an intriguing matchup, but they haven't earned that equity, I don't think, just because of how healthy they've been this year to be in that 15% or better class. Right.
What about the West? I mean, obviously, there are two teams that everybody points to. Do you see a third team, maybe a fourth team that actually, so we're still only like 15, 16, 17 games in, or if you're the Grizzlies, 5. There's a lot of space left in this season. Utah is playing incredibly well right now. Denver's been disappointing, but obviously had their run last year. How many teams do you think legitimately could win in the West?
I think it's just the Lakers and Clippers right now. Like, I want to believe in Denver, but I am just.
They've been better lately.
They have been better lately, and Jokic might be the MVP this year.
God, I love watching him. I love watching him play.
He's tremendous. I'm glad that he's like trying to score on purpose this year. Like, that is just he already unlocks everything because he just sees everything on the court. But like, now that he's going to score first, it's just made him more dangerous. But the wing depth defensively really worries me for Denver. It just makes me hard to go there with them. And Jamal Murray's just been weird this year. And then
he's looked a lot more. He sort of just looked like Jamal Murray throughout his career. But now we all, at least so many people, like your last memory of him was, holy crap, well, look what he did in the bubble. So the expectation of him being better this year, I mean, I think Mitchell struggled with that a little bit too. Kind of that raised expectation that comes from what those two guys did in Orlando.
All right. And to Murray's credit, like, he has been a lot better defensively. He has taken a legitimate step there. The passing has continued to improve a little bit, but it's just, still struggling with shot selection a little bit. And then the shots themselves haven't fallen at the same clip as last year. So that's probably going to bounce back a little bit, but you need the lead from him. And then Denver is a move away on the wing. I feel like they just need someone that, if they match up with a team like the Clippers, if they match up with the Lakers, they need bodies to throw on LeBron or AD. They're not going to find a stopper, especially on the trade market. If you have a guy that you feel like can defend either of those two guys, you're not trading him. But like the tier or two below, like, they need to find someone.
You need to find a way to trade for Jeremy Grant.
Any belief, right? He'd be perfect. Any belief in Utah?
It's the same issue to a lesser extent because, like, Royce O'Neal is very good. Joe Ingles is very good. It's just Joe Ingles is a little small for LeBron. And Royce O'Neal may be their best, like, 3-4 defender, but Royce O'Neal is also like 6'5", 6'6". And if you're putting him on Anthony Davis, that's just, I mean, you can't really do that.
Oof.
I want to say I just really appreciate how this, like, reformed new and sleek Jokic, like, he's clearly dropped some weight and he's moving really well and all that. He still looks kind of like one of us. Like he lost the weight but didn't get like super yoked out. Like, it's not like muscle guy. It's kind of aspirational. Like, we can all identify with him. I really appreciate him doing that for us.
I respect it, honestly. we need someone.
I've said that before. I think Marc Gasol has been fine for the Lakers, and I'm not saying he's out of shape, but his overall presentation, I find very
you need a tailor for that uniform. Like, they need to kind of inch it in certain spots, let it out.
Marc Gasol feels very man of the people in a way that I really appreciate. He always looks like he showed up to every game after a long beer pong session. And I appreciate that, him drawing the three of us and others like us into his world. It's nice. It's very nice.
They don't lose touch. The stars, they're just like us. All right, Nekias Duncan, you can go. You sign up for the subscribe to the podcast, the Dunker Spot, where you get all of your podcasts. You read his stuff at Basketball News. Just doing great work this year and getting a ton of recognition for it.
Dare I say a rising star, Nekias?
I think so. I don't know how much longer we're gonna be able to get you on our show. Like, it's just going to be too difficult. But congratulations, you really for all the successes, really well earned, and the work is just tremendous. So thanks, Mom. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on anytime, man.
That's Nekias Duncan, and he says anytime, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know, Andy, if we're gonna be able to get him. But in all seriousness, he is just doing spectacular work. And I was saying on the chat during the interview, like, one of the things we talk a lot about NBA social media and NBA Twitter, and some things that are good, some things that are bad. But one of the things that I think is great is that, like, talent gets noticed, and like good young talent particularly gets noticed. And he's definitely in that group. So really cool.
Nekias is really. He was just on the Ringer video with Kevin O'Kingmaker.
Yeah, that's
as
right.
I like to call him,
or Dr. Kevin O'Connor to you and me.
Kevin O'Connor,
Dr. O'Connor. I mean, so much responsibility to be able to watch all those games and keep our president healthy. I really do respect it. All right, so it's that was a lot of fun. Thanks again to Nekias for coming on. As you can see scrolling across the bottom of the screen, really excited on Monday. We'll be joined by Meta World Peace. He's got a really cool new app that he's going to come talk about. We're going to talk hoops. We're going to talk tech. We're going to talk all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
that's what happens when you talk to Meta.
The app is called X versus X Sports for male and female basketball enthusiasts trying to discover, connect, and play in live, locally hosted pickup games, scrimmages, tryouts, showcase games based on their skill levels. So that's really interesting.
Come to the showcase games for the ones that I'm playing at my skill level, not as good.
I think that's more like like Z versus Z.
Yeah, they don't have an app. They don't have an app for that.
No.
But yeah, so that's gonna be a lot of fun. Really excited to have Meta with us on Monday. And we really have a great slate of guests, I think, next week. Some really interesting guys from pop culture and social media and marketing. And it's going to be a fun week and an interesting one. And we're really excited about it.
Yeah, Jake Brennan on Tuesday. He's the host of the great music podcast, Disgraceland, about just the history of people in pop and rock and hip hop, R&B, and just the commonality of pretty outrageous, crazy, and at times genuinely bad behavior that's been in music. It's a phenomenal podcast. I've been a big fan of it for a few years. So very excited to have him on Tuesday. CJ Toledano Wednesday, Friday, Jared Wade. So it's a good week.
Yep. And we've even got people lined up for the week after that. Like this has been the golden age of booking on the show. Yeah. We're well ahead of schedule.
We've got on quite a little roll.
All right. So thanks again to everybody for tuning in, and we appreciate all the support we've been getting on the show. It's been really strong, and we really appreciate it. You guys are fantastic. And we will see everybody Monday with Meta World Peace.
Thank you, Nederland.